Marco.
Happy Sabbath to all of you. Again, those who haven't seen me this morning, happy to be with you and share this little study. The topic of the study is the development of our understanding of the end. It's a study where I'm trying to give an overview about the eschatological view of our movement, but I'm reaching out a little bit beyond our time. We have been looking at the understanding of the end time events that were developed or adopted by Protestantism. One marker for me was that they decided to be very cautious in regard to predicting future events, especially predicting time events or time-related events. So this was one decision the main line of Protestantism took, which is called the magisterial reformers: Luther, Zwingli, Calvin, etc. So then we had a look on the Millerite timeline, on Millerite period, what they did. And we saw that they incorporated major changes to what Protestantism had embraced. They continued on some things, of course. They adopted many of their views, but they prominently introduced the element of time. Basically correcting something that was indeed missing in order to understand end time events. They not only incorporated the element of time, predicting time or predicting events, but they also put a focus on external events. At least this is what happened at the beginning. As you remember, they understood the fall of the Ottoman Empire by analyzing what was happening outside. Nevertheless, even in this case, it seems to me that the focus was more on a calculation, right? On using the tools they now had in their hand to predict events. It was not so much an analysis of political struggle and what was going on, but nevertheless, they incorporated the external events, what they totally left out a couple of years later. So they ditched this, they blocked it out, they blacked it out, and when they came to the middle of their timeline, they basically didn't have any tools any longer in order to understand what was going to happen, because they just clung to this one element of time. And when it had been fulfilled, even the time was correct because they had the tools to do so. They did not understand its true meaning. At least in I'm speaking about the Millerite time, especially focusing here on William Miller and its followers. At the same time, you can then see that they obviously had such a high esteem of the possibility of time setting that they made a big effort to find an alternative time for the second coming, or the second advent. And we have seen that there were multiple times set. Jonas Wendell, 1868, 1870, or then 1873 were new dates. Then we have the prominent time of 8 April 1845. James White was behind that. William Miller was behind it, and Ellen White predicted against this. She had the vision against it. which was referred to in the word to the little flock. And obviously James White totally repented and totally accepted this correction. Then we have seen, for example, Enoch Jacobs, editor of the Daystar. Then we have Hiram Edson, who predicted 1850. And then we have a new culmination of time setting, and the movement again became sure that, yes, this is the correct time. 1850, 1851 was also set by Joseph Bates. And then again, Ellen White steps in and she says, time will never be a test again. There's no message hung on time. This was the context of what was going on, in the context of these quotes that are still being used today, of course. And we know them well in our movement. So there is no time. The third angel message needs no time to strengthen it. This is what she said. And she said it in July 1851 or so. So her comments were directly an answer or a commentary on what was going on in the movement. All right. So in conclusion, I said that the eschatological view of the advent of the Millerites shifted towards time, specifically the time of Christ's second advent. Afterwards, they had some intentions pushed by Ellen White or introduced by Ellen White to shift the attention towards changing character of Christ, adopting the character of Christ. Because basically, up to this point, even to the second advent, they only understood the Christ is coming, but nothing else they knew about what to do or how to adapt or how to change. Everything they knew was just something they already knew, they already had from their Protestant churches. Moral changes, changing of character based upon what they had been developed in former years and periods. So coming now 1860s, and White introduces a message where she points again to external events, something they left out, they continuously keep leaving out, not being able to see what was going on in their own surroundings, right? And the necessity to understand and adapt to these events. Speaking of slavery, the conflict, right? The political struggle within the United States, the division of the country, the Civil War. All right, she pushes basically, or she endorses that it's necessary to have an understanding and to have a change here and to have a major change in this, because Millerites basically thought they were ready, adapting, changing personal issues in their lives morally for the second advent, still not being against slavery in this time period. Okay, so this is basically where we left the last presentation, seeing that there were some important things Millerites introduced regarding the understanding of end-time events. They understood the element of time, they incorporated it again, but then they went full on this, only on that. You know, basically they kept sticking to this element. It was their hero, and it was their everything. They even had incorporated looking into external events, but they left this out completely after a short period of time. Right, next step then would be having a look to the history of Adventism and how they developed their views regarding future events. Let me share screen again. I need this. So, of course, Adventism adopted what Millerites had understood, had discovered. And when I'm speaking about Adventism, then I'm starting at 1863. There were major discoveries made and incorporated into the end-time view. The role of the heavenly sanctuary, which explained what had happened in October 1844, the investigative judgment, an element totally unknown to Protestants up to this point, and then the element of the Sabbath. Okay, these were things that were incorporated and new to Adventism specifically. So Adventists, well, we had also seen a little bit the role of this whole idea of premillennialism that many adopted after the Myriad movement. Other churches, evangelicals, adopted this. They hadn't seen this before. They hadn't been on that standpoint, before. So it became more famous, more widespread. Of course, there are also, we have seen in the movement of the dispensationalists, there are ideas about the rapture and the tribulation. So Adventists clearly took a stand against the idea of rapture. They don't believe in rapture pre-tribulation, yes. Before the time of tribulation, they don't think that the people will be removed. So that the church is taken away and they will not suffer. This is not what Adventists believe. Anyway, all of this is pretty known to us. I think there's not major new things. And basically, there's nothing new since Ellen White is not among Adventists any longer. So the development of eschatological views is something that is advanced. It is that there's new ideas added to this, but it all happens in Ellen White's lifetime. Yeah. Why is it so? Because something happens in Adventism. There is this measures taking against this crazy time setting that happens after 1844. The setting of new times of times. And basically every year there's a new time set. And after these measures have been taken, for a while, there was this possibility to focus on other elements that need to be seen in regards to what is important approaching the end of time. And we already mentioned, and White brings this focus in the 1860s on the character development. And of course, then she endorses 1888 another element, which is also part of this preparation for the end time period for the coming of Christ. Wagner and Jones, the message they bring on justification by faith, a perfection, a better understanding of it, a more deeper and more correct understanding of what an individual has to develop in its life and in its relation to others and to God. So these are elements that are new and they are incorporated, but it's interesting to see that this is all in her lifetime, yeah, because since then, basically, Adventists stick to Ellen White's warning against time setting, and they basically once again they lose the possibility to understand prophecy. So Millerites had rediscovered understanding prophecy. They came to understand prophetic events. They came to understand future prophetic events, but they quickly lost it. They were not able to understand these events within their own time after half of the road. speaking about 1844. So Adventists had all this knowledge now. They had understood the corrections, but after Ellen White is gone, they don't have anything in their hands any longer. And very, very similar to the Protestants, they decide that prophecy is something that should not be connected to time setting, should not be connected to setting future events, and should be only a focus on the true focus on prophecy is the relation between the person and Christ. I give you an example here. This is a text by Darmstadt. Of course, Darmstadt is just one speaker, and as you know, there are several viewpoints in Adventism, but I think he's a good representative of conservative Adventism. So let us read this together. Darmstadt writes, this is not in his famous book that we use, The History of Adventism. It's in a different place to be found. It's an article in a journal. 1993, he wrote, throughout the history, some individuals and small groups have discarded that counsel and proposed new interpretations of the time prophecies of Daniel and Revelation, but they failed. He is referring to the counsel of Ellen White to not hang a message on time. The present interest of some in interpreting the prophetic time periods as literal time to be fulfilled in the near future instead of considering its symbolic time has a number of factors. It just could be that these sincere individuals have no clear understanding of the past experience of the Advent movement. Consequently, they are repeating some of the same mistakes as the Adventists after 1844. Again, we see emerging the same sad results of the lifestyle of these modern futurists. Among them flourish many conflicting speculations that have a very destructive impact on the unity of the Church. Their constant and sometimes insidious criticism of the historicist view of prophecy has fueled distrust toward the way God has led us in the past, and thus the Church and its leadership. This criticism has had a strong negative effect on their evangelistic focus because they are not turned outward. One of the most powerful arguments against these speculations is to reveal what difference the biblical view of the fulfillment of the prophetic time periods has made and continues to be making in our lives. If Adventists have the correct prophetic understanding, they will reveal it in their lifestyle through their conversations, preaching, and writing. In all these things, the matchless love of Christ will be central focus. It's only in this light that others can see the relevance of the true interpretation of prophecy. So, if you read this quickly or just superficially, it sounds nice. But if you understand what he's saying, he's basically saying the correct understanding or interpretation of prophecy is something that cannot be related to using the element of time, nor to predicting events, not to predict something that's external. And the true interpretation of prophecy is basically incorporating the lessons of prophecy into my personal life. All right, so, and it has a negative impact, he says. If you do predict time, if you try to investigate what's going to happen, then you're not turned outward. You should do evangelism. It has an impact on, destructive impact on the church, unity. Then you fall into criticism of the church itself, basically of its leadership. It's a danger for church and leadership, etc. And Darmstadt, I think, should know better. That not necessarily doing these things is repeating the same mistakes of the Adventists after 1844. But resuming basically this viewpoint, Adventists, and we know this, we have seen this, have decided that don't touch anything that has to do with prediction or has to do with time. And they are quick to interpret Ellen White's words as we cannot use the element of time any longer. We've seen, and we've studied this before in last years, that this is not what Ellen White says. Yeah, she doesn't say that. And even Darmstadt, usually he is endorsing that when you interpret a text, then you need to interpret it taking into account circumstances and the time. And what gives a very clear response to what was happening, and to solve the issue of this time setting craziness in her time, she gives this very clear message, and we have to understand it from that perspective. But anyway, so interesting now that Adventism makes a full circle and basically comes to the very point where Protestants had left off. I told you in the beginning, one of the points that are being said about eschatological view of Protestants was the following: focus on the present life of the believer. The magisterial reformers emphasized the present life of the believer and the impact of living according to biblical principles. They did not place as much emphasis on elaborate schemes of future events, but rather on the believer's relationship with God in the present. They emphasized the authority of Scripture, but did not make detailed predictions about the timing of Christ's return or the unfolding of future events. They were cautious about speculating about specific details of the end times. Then the Murrite movement happened. It corrected wrong understanding and corrected errors regarding the understanding of end times that had been decided within the Protestant movement. And then comes Adventism and basically reversed everything to the status before the changes and the discoveries made by the Millerites. And interesting is that while Darmstadt here accuses Adventists making the same mistakes of Adventists after 1844, basically what he's saying is that we should do the mistakes that Adventists did before, before the Murrite movement. We're basically reversing everything to the situation, or basically continuing just the same logic and thought of Protestantism. Okay, I found it really interesting and important to see. Okay, so resuming this perspective, what is the focus? I ask you to think about what do you think is the focus, and what is the importance of understanding end time events? Is it just now is the time? Yeah, it's happening now. What would that contribute to the individual? What does it contribute spiritually to yourself? And in the focus of Millerites, we have seen, their focus was on time. They understood the events are happening really finally in their own time period, but not more than that. Adventists basically distance themselves deliberately from everything associated with time. And once again, they get rid of the possibility to understand a message of the end time events or to see anything, because unwilling of setting time even after an event has happened is getting rid of the possibility to discover where you are standing. And basically, since Ellen White up to our time, everything that is developing in the world, any major event, being the world wars, being 9/11 being recent wars all over the world, for Adventists are nothing specific other than this announcements, the signs of the end. If you have 200 years signs of the end, these signs are not signs anymore, right? For me, they are just something habitual, something normal. It's just a marker. It's just something that's always there, because this is something that's always there. If you do not see it and do not place it in prophetically and give it its rightful meaning. So if a war is a sign, and during 200 years there are different wars, and all of these hundreds of wars are always signs, so where is the sign? What's the signaling effect of this war? And same with other, of course, other things that happen in society and in nature. Okay, so while in the 1880s, at the beginning of Adventist history, the focus was shifted towards a deeper exploration of the human nature, of the character, of understanding the character of Christ. There was this, yes, but even then, there was something missing. Yes, so in this whole development of a people, we have something really missing. And let me just illustrate a little bit what I'm trying to say here. If you have the Millerites, we already saw that they understood sometimes and I'm not placing this in the correct, let's say, position as we understand it now. But the Millerites had some understanding. Time of the end, important, super important, because then you know, okay, now it's happening. It's now the time. It's our generation. Their time setting was confirmed by a prediction of the fall of the Ottoman Empire, and then fully convinced and boldened, they could also establish the state here. They had something. Yes, they had something really important. They understood something really important, but they missed out a lot of other elements in regards to end time events, in regards to what they need to understand of end time. So the focus was in time, and since the focus was in time, it was not enough to handle what was going to happen. Adventists, they take all this, yeah, they keep this, but of course they now do not need 1840, 1844 any longer. It's not part of the time of the end events, important for our generation or for the future generations of Adventists. I'm speaking of their position, but still, what is important is of course 1798, because it's still, if I understand correctly, the time of the end they see as relevant. So we are in the time of the end since 1798, and then nothing else is being seen or understood or said, but there is a focus on an upcoming Sunday law. When nobody knows, and the church believes it's also not important to know. Okay, this is it. Yeah, so there's a lot missing if you have the perspective of a reform line and the perspective of the development of how God prepares a people for the time of the end. Now I would like to do the next step, and this is the movement. But part one. So I'm speaking here of the time of the first leader, or the first angel, speaking of the movement under leadership of Elder Pippinger. And interestingly, something that we have always understood is Millerite history repeats. And major contributions happen by understanding that the time of the end again is there. Did come 1989, and a little later also the understanding of this waymark here, 9/11 waymark. And other than, or in opposition to what Elder Pippinger later would say and believes, he set time. Yeah. I already said in a brief comment last hour that time can be set after something happened, time can be set during something is happening, and time is being set or can be set before this specific event is happening. So in these cases, time was set after the events happened, but these events were connected to time. And once again, you have here something that Miller also did. He connected prophecy to external events, to something that's outside, happening outside of the small world of the church, the secluded church history and what's going inside the church. So, of course, there are more things happening, but my focus is on the end time events and what's important in regards to eschatological questions. Okay, I think that while he was still leading the movement, he also would acknowledge these other times here as part of this process. What was it? It was, I think, these other elements of formalization and increase of knowledge were also something that he would defend or would accept as being in 91 and what was this, 96, Time of the End magazine. Yeah, this is also setting of time, and he was, at least, I don't know if he was establishing this, but I remember that he was fine with the idea that these dates are part of the prophetic development and prophetic timeline. Okay, let me share something else. Interesting in order to see what Elder Pippinger and the movement was in the beginning understanding on time prophecy. This is a reform line. You know this line. I don't know if you know this specific one. It's an old one that we elaborated in 2010. But this specific chart was, I think, the first chart I did, or how I came into making charts as part of my note taking or trying to understand what the movement was teaching. This basically was done in a camp meeting in Wales, I think 2007, 2008. There was there was Manjit Bayan, there was Emma Bayan, there was Paminda Bayan, Elder Pippinger, all of them not elders yet at the time, but anyways, So we made this chart, and this chart is for this reason interesting because there are lots of elements that you know that we still hold to, but in this logic of 1, 2, 3 steps, yeah, and then 4 steps, and there's some complications here, but I never really fully understood, I admit. Then you have the time of the end, which is not really set as a waymark, but yeah, anyways. If you look at these times, I would like to jump here to the end. Interesting to see 1998, 9/11, then the Sunday Law in the middle of the line, and then it becomes really sparse, you know. Yeah, Let It Rain, nothing new. Judge Michael stands up, nothing new. 7 Last Plagues, nothing new. So all of this here is totally empty. Second Coming of Christ. So there, and it was empty because there was nothing being said about it. There was no message about a big part of the elements of end time events. And it's interesting because, as you can see, then it seems that Elder Pippinger, he's stuck to a very typical Adventist attitude. Everything culminates in the Sunday Law. The Sunday Law is the main focus, the main event. After that, what's happening is basically just a protocol of events that have to happen. But what's interesting and what we know is everything up to the Sunday Law. And after that, there's nothing. There's nothing that was said. Even in later years, I think there was not much said regarding the second half. And this is interesting because it reflects very much what the Millerites had in their hands. Yeah, they had also the time of the end. They had also here the role, or it's a different way, Mark. Yeah, we understand. But okay, the role of Islam and fulfillment of the first angel's message. And then they had this waymark, which is the Sunday Law for them, was the Sunday Law for them. They didn't understand it, but this is all they had. Okay. And I think even here it's even a little less, because regarding the Sunday Law, there's not much knowledge or nothing new. There's just this Sunday Law as an event that it's prominent, and that's it. Okay. And this was this chart. So going back to my notes here. So this is why I have this drawing. There's not much to fill in. Yeah. And then there was this struggle on time setting. Time setting, regards time setting, Elder Pippinger always said that we cannot set time. And when in 2012, Parminder Bryant made this prediction of 2014, Pippinger and other leaders quickly responded that we can't do this. Yeah, we cannot hang a message on time. We cannot set times. This is wrong. So Parminder had to take back this message and take it down. Nevertheless, you know that the idea of time setting, the issue of time setting, was reintroduced into our discussion. I think it was 2017 and onward. And then Pippinger a little bit kind of changed his view. And he said he was fine with it. He accepts it. He thinks it's okay. And what then happened was the development of quite a lot of time settings. And I think this culminated in an event that was being set as a future prophecy. And this was the attack on Nashville. Should have happened 2000. When was it? I think I took note of it. I forgot. So if anyone knows, it was in June.
July 18th.
July 18, and the year?
Was it 2021, Marco? I think.
Yeah, I think 2021. Okay, anyways, it's not so important, but they established this time, and this was in a moment when the movement already separated, right? There was a different stream now. The main part of the movement following Elder Paminda, Elder Tess, separated, distanced itself totally from this perspective. But nevertheless, Pippinger and others, they endorsed this event, July 18.
I think it's 2020.
Sorry?
July 18, 2020.
Okay. I think I find this out briefly, in short, because I have a text here. So, of course, what they said, and they made this famous announcement in a newspaper in Nashville, United States, that Islam would attack the city very soon, on the very July 18th, but nothing happened, and they could not, they could not defend it, of course. So this small episode of Jeff Pippinger of embracing the setting of time and the willingness of time setting led himself into the wrong path, because he was following this idea and this methodology of setting time, which led to a total wrong event. Nothing happened. And nevertheless, Pippinger would later comment on this. Actually, he just commented on this year. And let me see if just the texts are here. This is a message that he wrote in October 2023. And he says the following: as with the Millerite movement at the beginning, the Midnight Cry message was a correction of a failed prediction. In the Millerite history, it was a failure of the event that was predicted to take place. In Millerite history, at the beginning, the Philadelphians presented their failed prediction because God held his hand over a mistake in the 1843 chart. In the Laodicean movement, at the end of Future for America Incorporated, God never held his hand over the mistake. It was human hands that covered the truth that time was to be no longer. So what he now identifies, looking back, is that humans basically, covered the truth. The truth was that time should be no longer. And I think we all know who these humans were, according to him. And human hands represent human works, he says. In the ending movement of the 144,000, the era of applying time was sin, for the application of prophetic time was to be no longer used. So this is himself, just a couple of months ago, explaining that setting the event of July 18, 2020 was an error, but it was a human error. Yeah, and the humans that covered this message that the time should be no longer was something that sneaked into the movement, and it produced this error. Nevertheless, in other newsletters, Pippinger still sticks to the basic idea that Islam will attack Nashville at the Sunday law. So he believes that Islam will attack Nashville. He believes it will be at the Sunday law, but he says we don't know when this will happen. So why I'm saying this, or why I incorporate this information, is because I'm trying to make these links in the development of the last message throughout Protestantism, Adventism, Millerite movement, and our movement. And something that I think we can see here is that our movement started very similar to the Millerite movement. We are able to look at external events. We incorporated in the element of time. We were able to set the time of the end. We are able to set next events, following up events. And then there was an error, okay? But regarding the error was not understood by the leader. Miller did not understand, and you can see that by him setting still times for 1845, following years, he's still trying to find the correct date. So Elder Pippinger is doing something similar. It's a little different because he says, okay, time is the problem here. We have to disregard the element of setting time, but he still looks to give this event. It's a little bit the other way around, right? Miller started to try to find another date for the same event, and Pippinger tries to find another event for the date. No, he also tries to find another date for this event, but he doesn't want to say specifically which year or whatever. He says this cannot be said, it's at the Sunday law, but the event is correct. So Miller did the same, right? He believed the event is correct, Christ should come, but the date was wrong, and basically Pippinger does the same thing. So this is interesting, and this is of course sad, but it's helpful. It's helpful to understand history and the development, and the importance of understanding end time events and prophecy. So this is what I wanted to say in regard to the first part of the movement, because then we come to the second part, which is the movement under a new leadership. I'm thinking here of 2014 onwards, when there was a change in leadership. And then we have a lot of things going on, because the movement under Pippinger and Elder Tess fully incorporates things that have been disregarded, starting at the Protestants, continuing with the Adventist Church, continuing with the first leader of the movement. All have disregarded the possibility and the truthfulness of setting times. Movement part 2 incorporated the element of time, and this led to a development which is kind of beautiful visually, because if you remember these lines here, they are, well, of course we have this view of the timeline, right? We understand that there's more events happening. There's more. The timeline is not complete if you stop at the Sunday law. The timeline is not complete if you stop at the time of the end. There's much more to say. The timeline is not complete if you just see the beginning and the end. There's so many elements that populate this timeline. Really a guide, right? A guiding light shining on this path in every little step and every a little bit moving forward. And the other lines, if you illustrate it from this perspective, this understanding, are empty. Yeah, there's nothing going on here. There's so much missing on here, and didn't even illustrate what the Protestants understood. Here, there's total emptiness, just visually. Yes. So when you have now our movement, well, what we already, of course, continued to incorporate time of the end. Then we have these events here. Of course, I'm aware of the complications of different lines, right? And then the 144,000 line, but I'm just focusing at this point on the line of the priest, because this line is representative and will repeat in the other lines, correct? So this line here, this is what we have. This is where we started, basically. Once the movement changed leadership. And from that point onward, well, you know these lines, you can start filling in dates, right? Because all of this now is new. It's something that we, as a movement, then were able to see and to place, setting times. And what I am trying to illustrate here is that what is happening is that the line, or the line, becomes complete, but the understanding also at the same time is completed. It's not only the numbers and the dates here, but it's a content is there. So you have this full, there's not the focus only on one single event. What was on one time, like for the Millerites, there was only the focus on this, only this point, after they had said, okay, this happened, whatever, this happened. But we don't have a focus on only one single time. We focus on everything, because we understand its importance. 91 doesn't stand alone. 96 doesn't stand alone. 2001 doesn't come alone. You have always this development, and every single step is important. So therefore we can understand these steps, and therefore we can also set the event and set the times. This is something totally different now. And if you understand the logical reform line, then you see that it's only in our time and only in our movement that the understanding of the enrollment, or the development of the last events is getting completed. Yeah, it's getting very very harmonious and very detailed, and there's nothing left out. So what I think, this is one thing that happens, and this is very important in this little study that I'm seeing here over the hundreds of years of God's church, is element of time is understood. External events, the role of external events are understood, and very consciously observed and taken into account and incorporated in the understanding of the last events. And but if we would stay there, then we would only be an evolution of the Millerites, of the good phase of the beginning phase of the Millerites. Yes, we only would be in evolution, and we were just able to complete dates and events and advance more in this line. But again, if we would stuck there with these two elements, we only would be able to see part of it, because there are some major events still coming, right? We are not there yet. There's the son-in-law and the everything from the son-in-law onward on the line of the 144,000 is still coming. So if we would only be there with these two elements, then we wouldn't understand the rest, I believe, neither. But this is why I mentioned this. When Ellen White steps in, what she brings into the prophetic message or the understanding of end-time events is that you cannot only stick with these elements, which are an important factor, which need to be incorporated, but you also need to understand more than that. Because on the level of trying to understand and to live the character of Christ, yourself, every individual, to understand human nature, you need to understand more things. And this is when, in our message, through the Midnight Cry, we have the understanding of the Eden to Eden message. And this is how, well, I call it Eden to Eden. Once again, we can see that there's this one element which was missing and which is understood. It was the issue of slavery, understood by the Millerites, basically and white. And then we have in our time the issue of equality, which is understood. This element now basically is the marker of our movement, isn't it? Though we understand time, though we are able to predict, to establish times, this just became, I would say, as I see it, it becomes a tool that we can use. Yeah, it's like a pen that we can use to write better. Or like this pen here, I can write on the tablet. It's more advanced, it helps me, and it's good. But it's not everything, right? Because I need to know what to write. And if I now have this element, other than time, then the message really becomes a content. So this is why I was asking, why do we need to know the time? Why is it important to establish times? And yes, I understand there is an importance. There's an importance of knowing time. First, it's waking people up, right? So if we didn't know that we are the generation, it would be totally different. But as we know that we are in the time of the end, it helps us to focus on everything. You know, it helps us to focus on getting ready, getting prepared, and to study at all. Because if it's not important to study this yet, because it will happen perhaps in 500 years, maybe I never have found the time to study it. But now I know it's our time, so I have to find the time and study it. So the time element is important, and it becomes a tool that we are able to use. But in my opinion, it's not the key, or it's not, key is the wrong word. It's not the main focus of our movement, because nobody's speaking about time. Yeah, we speak about time. Yes, we do that all the time, but it's not something that is so major and so important that it becomes the only focus. It's not the most important thing, right? For us, important became to understand what do we have to do to get ready. What is the message that we have to share among us and with others? And therefore, I can fully believe that we don't have a message hung on time, but it's a message which totally understands and gives its right place to the element of time. Okay, so you may have seen a couple of days ago there was a study being made by Curtis in the UK, and he had a question basically, and this question was these two events here. Let me just give it a different color. If I'm repeating and understanding incorrectly. So this is the Sunday law. And this is the line of the 144,000. Yeah. What about these events? These events are important because Sunday law is preceded by an agitation. Basically, you see it coming, you hear it, you feel it, you know it's going to happen. It's manifesting itself. The Sunday law is manifesting itself in society, in the world, in politics. This is one of the important arguments that Elder Tess brought when speaking about the issue of Sunday. So there's nothing happening in regards to Sunday. It's not a controversial issue at all in society. But if you speak about equality, yeah, it's everywhere. It's a dividing factor. It's a big issue in politics, etc. And this is agitation. You know, you need to understand these preceding events. So there's agitation going on before the Sunday law. It's important to understand. And then he gives this suggestion that this waymark here is 2022, June 24th. What happened on that day? Two things happened internally. Elder Tess gave a very important message. I think 2 presentations she did, and externally there was a Roe versus Wade turn down. So on that time, back then, if you remember, we were aware of these things happening outside, inside. You know, we understood it was not coincidence, right? But now what he's suggesting is that we can establish this as the increase of knowledge on the 144,000 timeline. Nevertheless, there's another event here coming. And then he makes a point that the Sunday law cannot happen in 2024. If I understood correctly, someone corrects me if I'm wrong. What I'm trying to say is that this is coming back to a point that I tried to make in the last presentations. So you can set time after the event. We did so in 1991, 1996, 2005, 2009. All these dates we established and set after they had already taken place. 2012, 2014, 2016, all the dates on the timeline we established later after it happened. This was May 25th. I think it was the death of George Floyd, increase of knowledge in the last dispensation of the line of the priest. So there are a couple of dates that were established by the movement. Then the attack on Kabul and other events marking the formalization in 2021, This was August 15th. And then we have this date of 2022, June 24th. So these were all, maybe more, but I think these were the dates that we set, but after the event had happened. So there's also time that is being set during the event. I think that during the Midnight Cry, during the conference 2019, right? We understood at this very point that this was happening. Yeah, we understood what it was. It was during this event that we started to say, okay, this is the Midnight Cry. Was there some comment? And then there's also time that is set before the event would happen. This is not so often, but 2019, 11/9 is, for example, is an example here. I think is it the only one? Are there more? Oh no, there's also 2021, right?
Another marker.
Yeah.
2012 was a prediction.
I didn't hear that.
2012 was a prediction before, even though all the tests helped us look back and say, yeah, it was correct. It was still a prediction for the future.
Yeah. Yes, of course. 2012 is a prediction of the future, if you mean this, right? But what I mean is that in 2012, we did not understand that this was this specific waymark.
I thought
So
we knew it was the Sunday law of priests. Oh, I see
Yeah,
what you mean. We thought it was the Sunday law.
Yeah.
I get what you're
So
saying.
I mean that in 2012, we didn't know that this was the formalization of this time period, right? We understood later that 2012 had this importance. The same we did not, but this is why I put it in brackets. Yeah, it was understood. 2000. Perhaps we should take this out because it was understood. We should put that here. I think this is better. Sorry.
Ask the question. Ask the question about 2022. I don't recall that being a waymark that Alchemindus put in the movement, or I stand corrected.
This is just recent. It just it happened like last week.
I was there. I was in the room, but I don't recall it being an Alchemindus waymark. It's just another member's study.
Okay, if you have been there, then maybe you can correct me. I understood it was suggested as being the increase of knowledge here on the timeline of the 144,000.
Said that. Who said that?
Curtis.
Yeah, it's not Alchemindus. It's just like me saying it. It's not.
Yes, it's correct. And I'm not saying it's established, yes, but it's something that we are saying, or it's people are saying, or someone is saying, right? Ellen Paminda only said, I think it was an interesting study. It was a good study, but I don't think that he said, yeah, this is correct. Is this okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for this clarification. I do not want to say, okay, this is it. This is how we see it. This is how they move. And I was going to say that I believe, of course, that there will be upcoming studies on these issues, right? And if we have been seeing, the time element is not something that we are scared of anymore. It's something that we are incorporating. We are trying to understand when we can set events. It helps us. It's not something that is problematic or it's a big issue. It's just understanding what's going on, right? And if we can attach it to a date, then it's helpful, it's good. But if we don't have the date, it's not such a big issue either. And in the last presentation, there was a question of the disability of the Millerites setting or understanding 1863. Maybe they would have understood, they would have been able to set the date of 1863 if they haven't fallen into several errors they made afterwards, after 1844. And I said maybe, but I don't think that it was so important, right? They had a message, they had a test on time, they passed the test, and that was it. And I don't think that the setting of the time is so key, because it's just a time. And then, what then? You know, if you do not have if you do not have the weight on it, something else, then it's not very much. Because, and this is something I wanted to finish with now in our study, because Elder Paminda, in this study done by Curtis, made an interesting comment towards the end. The question, what is this all for, right? Certainly the Millerites felt very empowered, being able to set times and break with this Protestant tradition of no time setting. Being able to predict events in history must have felt incredible. Nevertheless, what for, right? And there's this one element that helps you, of course, taking things seriously, to focus, to prepare yourself, well, but other than that, what is it for? To wake up a generation is, I think, a very important issue. And our generation has been woken up. And once this is done, I, for myself, yet do not see the big importance of time. Do we need a date for certain events? Do we need a specific date? Do we need to predict it? What we need to understand is what is happening, based on what it's happening, what is the content, and what else do we need to know? For example, what else do we need to change in our lives? And Elder Paminda made this comment, I'm finishing on this now, that maybe there's an aspect that we have disregarded, that we have not really developed in terms of what all this is for. I looked into the Great Controversy, and there was something interesting that stuck to my eyes, because it says the Great Controversy between Christ and Satan. Yeah, for us it's always the Great Controversy, but the book is called The Great Controversy between Christ and Satan. So the controversy is in first place not between us and Satan. It's between Christ and Satan. I think in our perception, the Great Controversy is about our survival of end time, right? Of being fit for the test, of being ready for the test. But we, and of course, as being part of this, it's natural that we think that way. Nevertheless, we may forget that the controversy is out there, and it's a controversy between Christ and Satan. This is a controversy that's happening. We are part of this controversy against our will. We became part of this because this is how it was chosen at the beginning of the events after Satan was still in heaven. nevertheless, when we are now part of this, what is it that we have to do? Is it just that we are this play ball, which shows who's the winner in all this, in this conflict, or is there something that we can do more than that? That just trying to be on the right side? And let me read. I thought this was Anne White, but it was not Anne White who wrote the introduction or the preface. It was the publishers of this book, and they say, we are participators, we are actors in this conflict. But every one of us comes at times a longing to know more of the great controversy. How did the controversy begin, or was it always there, here? What elements enter into its awfully complex aspect? How am I related to it? Yeah, I think this is a question. How am I related to it? What is my responsibility? I find myself in this world by no choice of my own. Does that mean to me evil or good? So how am I related to it in this conflict, which is not my conflict in the first place? And then there is this idea or this thought that Elder Tess introduced some time ago, that this controversy is incorporating us more than we might perhaps understand or believe. Let me read a text. CON, I don't know if anyone can help me what's it standing for. It's CON 19.2, and White saying, Satan had peculiar interest in watching the developments of events immediately after the fall of Adam, to learn how his work had affected the kingdom of God and what the Lord would do with Adam because of his disobedience. So Satan did not know what would happen, but he was extremely interested, and he was an observer of the events. He was learning from what humans were doing, right? And by observing what humans were doing and what Christ was doing, he could then plan himself and decide on his actions. So in this controversy between Christ and Satan, humans all of a sudden from the very beginning are important and are something that are being watched. And not only are they being watched in order to see who is falling, who is standing, but in order to teach something to Satan. Perhaps I copy this. This little quote. And Elder Tess was making this point, right? That Satan, he's a learner. He's watching, and he doesn't know, but as he's learning what we are doing, what humanity, what governments, what the church is doing, then he could adapt and he could develop his plan of action. Of course, we know that there's also Ellen White saying the whole universe is watching. The whole universe is watching with inexpressible interest the closing scenes of the great controversy between good and evil. But this controversy is between Christ and Satan. But in watching the closing scenes of this controversy, they are watching the world. So there must be something about humanity, about humans, that is so interesting for the universe. And what Elder Paminda was inferring or was saying is that it's not just about who is losing, who's winning, right? Who's making it. It's not about that. It's not how many of the humans are accepting the message and are being coming to heaven. It's not about that, but it's about and I don't know, he's not using this word, but it's like an experiment, or it's like testing how things are working, how equality is working, how God's government, how God's state, how the church is working, how all these elements are correctly working, and what is missing to complete, I would say, the guidelines and the working of God's church and of the universe. So there's something about Earth, because Earth knows the sin, right? It's something about human beings that they have indifference to the angels, and it's not only that human beings are working this out, if I understand his suggestion, but it's the whole universe is working on this. But humans are playing a role, and they are playing a role because they're in a certain position. They know sin, they know death, and they are forming societies where they are working out these issues. So potentially, Paminda says, the universe can make wrong decisions and potentially fall into sin in the future. But if we work it out, not alone, not on our brain power alone, of course, but together with God, if we work it out how society, how politically everything would be perfect, then we give back to the universe something that they need in order to protect themselves of doing this error, this potential error that they can do, fall into sin. I'm closing with these thoughts that Elder Paminda was sharing, because once more, I believe that the message of the end time events, eschatology, becomes a very different and a very more profound element. Yeah, it's not about just knowing when, where, what is happening. There's something that gives a way deeper and profound content to everything. There's an understanding of why do we need to wake up? Why do we need to do things? Why do we even understand that we are there? Elder Tess introduced this element which marks our movement, the element of equality, to fulfilling it and bringing it to every single corner of our lives, of the church lives, and into society. And the light is continuing. There's more to understand, but I hope that you gained something from this presentation of having this overview of the development of end-time events from something that was very, there was always truth. There were all elements that were important to understand, but basically there's this struggle of things that the Lord helps His church to understand. The church distancing itself from the elements that were introduced, the good things they discovered, just embracing Him too much, not willing, not open, not listening to more to come. And then now we are here in this movement, and there's a lot happening. It's not the element of time alone. The time element is, I would say, as I understand it, it's a tool. It's something that we embrace. It's something normal. It's good. It's important. We can use it. It's not the key issue, right? It's just part of it, of many other things. But we have a message, and this message, like in the time of Ellen White, in the 1860s, in the 1880s, brings a very different focus of the importance of the understanding of the end time events. And then if we progress now in seeing these thoughts of Elder Parminder, I think this is just marking really that there is something very important to know and to understand for us that are forming this last generation. So this was my study. Thank you for your participation. And like we had in the last hour, if there are some questions or some comments, you're welcome.
Thank you, Elder Marco.
So, Elder Marco, so
yes,
the inhabitants of the other worlds are watching what we do for preventive measures. Is that how I'm understanding you say that?
As I said, it was just a comment that Elder Parminder did, and I'm just trying to repeat his comment to understand what he said. He did not elaborate very much because it was just a comment within a presentation of someone else. But well, as you say it, it sounds a little bit, I would say dry. Yes, it's to prevent. It's about everything, right? Elder Parminder said the universe hinges on us. It can swing totally into one direction, or it can be swinging totally into the other direction. It can be set up for being lost forever, or it can be set up for being right and to win forever. So it's not a small measure. It's not a small step. It's about everything.
So then do you think once we get there, inhabitants from other worlds will come up to us individually and say they've actually learned something from watching our personal experience?
Technically, I don't know how this will happen. We have been teaching quite a while, right? That we have still a job to do in heaven. There's a long time that where we will teach others, and we said we will teach about equality, for example, and patriarchy and these things, slavery. We have to teach people that died on a level where they thought these things were okay, but they will be still in heaven. It seems there's much more than this. Yes, it's deeper. It's a complex system of logic and of things that the universe is eager to understand and to see how it really works. Because I think we can prove what is the correct decision. Yes, and like Natalie says, like in the mirror of time, we are being part of it. Yeah, we are not a play ball. We are not an experiment or something like that. We are not trying to survive, because in certain views of end time events, I think it's kind of another version, a religious version of the survival of the fittest. The one who is personally best prepared to survive will survive. And at the end, the focus is on ourselves, oftentimes. I'm getting ready, I'm getting ready, I'm getting ready. How will I survive end times? How will I escape persecution? Where's the best place to live, etc.? So it's about how I can make it, and we are understanding that this is not it, yeah, and it's not this egoistic vision of end time events, but it's something that we are actually taking part. It's not we are solving it, but we are taking part of a big important issue that the whole universe is watching upon, and it's not watching upon. Not only watching on us because they're interested in where we go, what will be my destiny, but they are watching because it's lessons that they will be able to take from it. And maybe, as you said, we will then teach and explain. But it seems to me that it's a present time. It's a live watching and learning right now.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. So thank you very much for this invitation, this possibility to share this little study with you. And let me invite you for a closing prayer. Heavenly Father, we praise you. And we are waking up from, I think, a very narrow-minded vision, a very small, limited understanding of what it means to be part of your people at this point of time. We surely don't think much of us, of ourselves. We don't think that we can contribute much. We don't understand very much. We don't see very far. But then we see that you are giving us a place, a role, and importance. We just ask you that you help us to do the best that we should, that we can do with your help. It's more than an honor to be part of your people. We thank you and we ask you for keep guiding us and everyone, especially I'm asking for the group from Tanzania who invited me to do this special Sabbath presentation. Guide them, help them, everyone there, and their obstacles and their challenges and their personal life situation and their questions. And we thank you with our whole heart in Christ's name. Amen. Sorry, I said Tanzania, it was Zambia, right?
Okay, thank you very much, Elder Marco. I want to appreciate your service on behalf of the Zambians. We really appreciate to have time to share with us. And I appreciate everyone who has managed to attend with us. God should bless you. Yeah, my last few words, 2023 has been a hectic year, but it has also been a blessing because God didn't actually leave us without the messages. I think the Bible says where sin abounds, grace abounds more. And we have been blessed to end this year. I think this is the last Sabbath in 2023.
Yeah.
It's a blessing to end it on such a note. Yeah, having these messages and coming together, it's a blessing indeed. Despite the year has been hard, but God has been with us, and I'm wishing Happy New Year in advance to each one of us. It's a blessing that we are among the living to enter the next year. May God bless us all. And you must be willing to come and share the message again when we actually call you. Yeah, and without wasting much of our time, I understand there is another camp that is going on. We'll end here so that we prepare for the next presentation by Elder Paminda. May God bless us all. Thank you.
Thank you.